English translation 119th contact. Saturday, 3rd of February 1979, 1446, sir.
Once again, you needed an extremely long time before you found the way to me again. About a week ago, it was also the case that I had been called for sure by you. But then, around the 4th hour of the morning, your call suddenly faded away, and nothing else happened until today.
Sure, that is right. We were actually here to see you, but then we were quite suddenly ordered away because unknown flying devices were approaching our station, with which we have already busied ourselves for months, but we cannot make any contact with them.
Ah, by that, you mean the UFOs that showed up recently in Italy and Australia and in various other countries.
Sure. These flying devices are obviously constructions of a very well-developed technology, which is not yet so advanced, however, that they could move into our refined areas of communication.
By that, you probably mean at the same time your somewhat different physical structure, right? By that, I mean even the dimensional difference, through which you, in a moderate measure, exhibit different and much finer vibrations compared to us earthworms.
Sure.
And you have no idea where these UFOs come from and what human races manufacture and pilot these?
There is complete uncertainty about that. Every contact attempt has been unsuccessful so far, unfortunately. It seems to be absolutely the case that they do not perceive us at all.
But you could, nevertheless, simply fly up to these unknown flying objects.
That cannot be done, unfortunately, because the objects depart immediately as soon as a flying device that is foreign to them approaches them.
I find that crazy. After all, you should have certain possibilities with your highly developed technology.
Even our possibilities are limited. You are only looking at everything from the perspective of an earthly standpoint, whereby you overestimate our technology, at least in this case.
That is possible, and I see, therefore, that even for you, limits are set in certain matters of technology.
That is of correctness. But now, I would like to give you my best wishes for the start of your 42nd year of life. We have only come here today for this reason.
Dear thanks, Quetzal, and also you both, Simya Se and Ptah, I would like to thank very cordially.
Under no circumstances did I want to fail to greet you today and to give you my dearest wishes.
I have also come here with the same wishes for you.
You are making me rather embarrassed, but I am very happy and thank you very much. But on the other hand, I must already say that you behave rather peculiarly, namely just like Earthlings. After all, such birthday wishes are otherwise not your style.
That is of correctness, but especially Simya Se has pushed very much to offer you wishes in this form, because through this, we can draw you near to how much we are already connected with earthly things in reference to certain common interests of the Earth humans.
That makes me very happy. Have my cordial thanks for that. But I suspect now that you have not only come to congratulate me, right?
Yes, we have, because we actually only wanted to give you our wishes, but also the wishes of all others, who could not come here, unfortunately.
That is the truth. We simply wanted to exchange a few words with you, greet you and congratulate you, and be together with you for a short time.
That is of correctness.
Now you are really making me embarrassed. Could we not talk about other things? I have all sorts of questions that will certainly make me less embarrassed. I do not mean to say that I am not happy about your visit and your very dear wishes, quite the opposite, but it just makes me embarrassed and uneasy. I am not very used to congratulations.
Sure, I already understand. And if you feel better through another conversation or through a questioning, then we will gladly comply with your wish.
That is very kind of you. Very many thanks. Look here. Here is an entire stack of descriptive sheets. I have them fully written with cosmic and mathematical calculations regarding various things. In the main, this was all about calculating the expansion rate of the creation, and thus also of the universe. With this, I wanted to work out the distance of the diameter of the universe, and thereby came across the following results. If I may present these.
Sure, just speak.
You may not have succeeded in getting the right data calculation because you would have needed certain basic data for that, which you could not have at your disposal, however. You apparently got involved in something in this respect, which you probably would have better omitted. Hence, your disappointment should not just be mild, which is why you had better leave out this question.
That should correspond to the correctness.
Are you really also of the same view as Quetzal, Ptah?
I have just made my opinion known to you.
And you, girl?
I find that unfair of Father and Quetzal. Just ask your questions, because I am sure that you would never present calculation questions to us if you were not sure and confident to a very high percentage that your calculations were right. I am confident that your calculations are of importance and contain, at worst, only small errors that are of insignificance.
Is that really your opinion?
But of course, because I know you very well and know so very exactly that you really would never approach us with such questions if you were not sure of your case.
But now, in this case, this might be an exaggeration, my child.
That is also my view. It would be a pointless endeavor to listen to these questions.
That is very intolerant of you both. On the other hand, you should, nevertheless, know our friend better. At least give him a chance, because he has very much more than just earned this through all his surely very great efforts with his calculations, even if these are faulty, which I do not presume, however, and could not understand.
In this light, your argumentation is of correctness. Then it should be so. Bring forth your questions, my friend.
And you, Quetzal, do you also agree with it?
If Ptah gives consent, then I will argue nothing against it, even though everything in this regard seems senseless to me. I myself, as well as Ptah and our scientists, could only take on and carry out these calculations if we had the necessary basic data for this.
Ah, then that means that you cannot give me any information if I tell you my data and calculations?
No, my words were not meant in such a manner. They only referred to the fact that we could not carry out these calculations without certain basic data. We could not calculate these necessary basic data ourselves, however. But we can give you information, of course, because we do know the data, which we ourselves have not calculated, but which we otherwise received. However, it is my view that even if you had come into possession of the necessary basic data, which I rather doubt, you yourself could not carry out the calculations, because certain calculation formulas and arithmetic formulas are of necessity in order to work out the exact results. But you cannot know these calculation and arithmetic formulas because they move in a cosmic structure.
That can indeed be determined easily when I bring up my questions. But tell me, where did you get the basic data for these calculations? And you know, with some logical reflection, one can also find out certain structures and formulas, even if afterwards one cannot neatly explain the entire development. One does know how one has done something, but one cannot explain it.
That is of correctness, what you explain, because these interesting processes are very well known to me from my own experience. And since you say that, everything makes me somewhat reflective. But to your question, we, that is, our scientists, retrieved the basic data known to us from a cosmic memory block approximately 2,700 years ago. That is how they are known to us. Oh, so have you perhaps done the same?
No, I have not done that, which I can assure you.
Now I am actually interested in your questions and calculations. Present them to us.
Happy to do so, my son. Thus, my first question. Is the speed of light constant of presently 299,792.5 kilometers per second, which is calculated by our earthly scientists, correct?
This figure is of correctness. But I notice with your question that you speak of a present constant. What do you want to express with that?
I have calculated that the light constant steadily decreases within the framework of a certain half-life.
But that is not.
You see now, and you too, Father, I knew it. You may never underestimate him. His calculations are definitely at least extremely close to the truth, if not even error-free. But it also could not be otherwise with him when he wants to present such things to us. Just think of his mystery, which surrounds him and which we still cannot fathom.
That is unbelievable. How could you find out that the constant of light is only apparently of stability?
You will learn that yet, if you want to listen to my other questions.
You make me very curious.
Good. Then the next question. Is my calculation right that only in the present creation universe, a day amounts to 301,040,000 years, as Genesis explains this?
That is naturally of correctness.
Good. So then a creation hour in the present material evolution universe amounts to 12,960,012,960,000 years. A minute amounts to 216,216,000 years. And a second amounts to 3.6,3600,000 years. While a creation age, then, would have to be calculated at 25,920,025,120,000 years. Everything is reckoned according to terrestrial years, of course.
Yes, that's right.
Very well. Then, once again, a Genesis calculation. A day of the first material creation universe evolving in this form amounts to 3/11 of 40,000 well-known years of earthly chronology. And this is calculated from the first beginning of its becoming up to the last iota of its passing. In a 7x7-fold form, the length of day of creation increases with every new and higher developed universe. So the next universe, and thus creation, would have to have a longer day, which is to be calculated at 280,000 years, according to which, then, the calculation would have to look like this.
After the first coarse material universe, the coarse material matter refines itself from universe to universe, until with the seventh stage, all of the coarse material matter is changed to fine materiality.
After the seventh development, the creation would then have to evolve to the creation and carry out the corresponding transformation. Now, my calculations do not include the last figures, but they agree in the large values. Is this right?
This question is superfluous because you know about the correctness of the calculation itself.
Thanks. So then to the next question. Is it right if I have calculated that space and time are separate and independent, in their course, from the creation itself, because this is determined by space and time themselves?
Your calculation is right.
Thanks. Then is it also right that in the next material evolution universe, a creation hour amounts to 90,090,000,000 and 720,720,000 years? A minute amounts to 1,001,000,000 and 512,512,000 years, and a second is accordingly 60 times less.
You know that you do not have to ask, because the calculation is of correctness.
Then just not. But is it right? Now, if I have calculated that the creation's expansion rate, for the initial period, was 44,069,497.5 kilometers per second, with a steadily constant half-life rate of almost exactly 6,347,755,102,040 years, from which the results arise that the expansion rate of the creation at its universal beginning was 147 times the speed of today's speed of light constant. But this speed decreased with a half-life of 6,347,755,102,040 years, and continues to decrease. So the starting point of today's light constant lay at a speed of 344,292.9 kilometers per second. But through the already elapsed portion of half-time, it has already dropped by 4,500.4 kilometers per second, whereby the present and current light constant of 299,792.5 kilometers per second arises, according to which an original light year, from the starting point of the current light constant, of around 1.390 x 10 or 15 kilometers has amounted. This means, according to my calculations, that the constant of 1 second of the initial period of the expansion rate must have been 147 times faster than the constant of 1 second today, because at that time, around 46 trillion years ago, the speed of light was even 44,069,497.5 kilometers per second. From this, it also arose in my calculations that 1 second has, in each case, exactly that number of chronons that the light constant of 1 septillionth of a millimeter contains in itself, because a chronon has a length of 105 septillionths of 140 millimeters, and because exactly that number of chronons is able to pass a certain point, from the source to the fade out of a beam of light, as the speed of light contains in itself. So in the present case, around 20.394 x 1030 chronons per second. This was even easier to calculate since I knew that space and time are dependent on each other. Therefore, both time holds space in itself as also space holds time. From these results, however, my acceptance has arisen that through the transformation and lowering of the speed of light by the half-life, also space and the chronons change themselves, according to which, then, normal space would have to change itself to hyperspace, and the chronons would have to change themselves to tachyons, which continue to exist in hyperspace as the smallest units of time at their own old speed, according to which the oldest tachyons would therefore have to have a speed of 44,069,497.5 kilometers per second in their own hyperspace. It also became clear to me that each dwindling away of a half-life creates its own hyperspace. Thus, already 7 different hyperspaces, 7 half-lives, 7x, 6 to 347, 755, 102, 40, 44.434 x 10, 12 years would have to exist in our universe. Furthermore, it also became clear to me that time travels into the past or future can only be associated with this fact, because somehow the traveling object must be manipulated in such a way that the flow of chronons is steered. So for example, if tachyons with a speed of light higher than ours and present in hyperspace or normal space would be stored around a traveling object, then it would be hurled into the past, while a flow of chronons below our current speed of light must have a journey into the future as a consequence. This has become clear to me, but the how, that has remained a riddle to me. It is now also clear to me that the chronons can only stay and move in normal space, while the tachyons only move in hyperspace. This, then, along with many other things that have become perceptible to me, about which I would still like to say nothing today, however, because I am not yet sure of the results. Ah, yes, what could still be said? According to my calculations, after the end of the next half-life, our light constant would have to be 172,146.45 kilometers per second. Now to these things, the big question. To what extent are my calculations and findings right?
You are marvelous, simply marvelous.
Why?
If I am not mistaken, then your calculations have turned out to be very accurate. Is that so, Father? Judging by your facial expression, The calculations must be very accurate.
They are. It is stunning and unbelievable.
Are your statements and explanations actually not based on retrievals from a memory bank?
Certainly not. There are enough people in our group who have seen how I dealt with the calculations for nearly 36 hours.
And you have in fact retrieved no data from a memory bank?
No, Quetzal, I already said that several times.
That is phenomenal. It is simply unbelievable. Then how did you come to the necessary basic values?
I just no longer know that so exactly. I made various calculations based on assumptions and certain information that I had from Sfath and Asket. With this, I then calculated for about 3 hours, and suddenly had a basic datum, which seemed very plausible to me. With this, I then calculated further, and finally, after many hours, came to those results which I have presented to you all. But with everything, it is completely impossible for me to explain how I came to the basic data by way of the calculations. I just do not know how to repeat the calculation process anymore. It is only clear to me that I did not simply receive the data from somewhere or from outside. Rather, I calculated them. But the how, I do not know that anymore.
I agree with Quetzal. Everything is simply phenomenal.
I would still have a few more questions. Is it right that the absolute hyperlight constant lies at a value of 10^7,000, as Sfath once explained this to me?
That is of correctness. At the same time, it concerns the constant in the space of the absolutum of creation, so the highest speed of creation, and the creation's expansion rate at the origin.
Thanks, that is clear to me. Is it also true now, as I have calculated, that the great time, in the most exact calculation, amounts to 311,39,999,999,960 years, and that the universe only expands during 155,599,999,980 years, and then falls into a contraction speed, which causes a fallback with a declining speed in the constant half-lives, like in the case of the building up, until the maximum speed of the original, preceding light constant of 44,069,497.5 kilometers per second is reached again? If that is true, then a great time comprises 49 half-lives during 6,347,755 of 140 years. In which case, then, at 1/2 of the total, so at 24.5 half-lives, the change from becoming to passing takes place, or just the change from expansion to contraction. This would mean, then, that within the context of the creation's evolution, everything created by it during this fallback could still develop to perfection, whereby no iota of that which is created by it would be eliminated.
That is also of correctness.
Good. Then still these questions. Can you explain to me what diameter in light years the creation had exactly at the time of its first expansion process at the origin, and whether universal space must be measured in a straight line or in a curve?
Have you not also calculated that?
No, I did not know how I should do that.
On one side, the expansion of the creation amounted to 14 vigintillion translators note, a 14 followed by 63 zeros, light years. This expansion must be multiplied twice for half of space and multiplied 4 times for all of space. The distances in universal space must be measured in a curve because there is no straight line.
Aha, I thought that myself. So then theoretically, the universe could be measured in a middle straight line in such a way that 28 vigintillion light years count as a central starting point, whereto the distance in light years of the previously completed expansion would then still come. Is that right?
That is of correctness.
So it is therefore also true that the expansion of the universe takes place all-dimensionally and spirally, where the shape then resembles a somewhat round egg?
Also that is of correctness.
Good, then still one last question relating to this. If the initial expansion rate was 44,069,497.5 kilometers per second, then at the same time, it concerns the constant of immaterial energy. Consequently, this would have to be consistent for the time of existence of the universe. But on the other hand, the spiritual thoughts of human beings would also have to move at this speed throughout this entire great time. So, at 147 times the speed of light, if I calculate this according to today's light constant, where the material thoughts of the material consciousness reach, at most, simply the speed of light.
Only applies to normal space but not to paraspace, in which the speed is indefinite. Therefore, 10,7,000 light, 10,7,000 x, 299, 192.5 kilometer sec.
There is probably nothing more at all that remains hidden to you. Your explanations are just as accurate as all explanations before. What other things have you still gotten to know?
Nothing more, at least not definitively. But tell me, can one make my calculations and results accessible to the earthly public?
Nothing speaks against that. Only you certainly have to take into account that you will be insulted. As usual, as a liar and fantasist, because earthly science is still a long way from becoming understanding of the truth, even only approximately. It is still moving, as you know, on very limited tracks, from which the scientists are very faint-hearted and create small material calculations about the existence, the development, and the width and expansion of the universe.
That does not matter to me because I have long been used to the making bad of my person. But now, I would still have some other questions, if you have time.
Sure, just ask.
It is a great joy for me just to be able to be together with you today. By the way, Quetzal still wants to connect you to his device before you go again. You seem to need it most urgently.
That is possible. It is not going particularly well for me. At the same time, I just think that everything has no great meaning anymore. Somehow I feel this.
I know, because everything is only a postponement, which is why I myself very often feel sad.
You should not do that, because one should not worry too much about what cannot be changed.
You say that so easily.
Of course, what else should I do? But let's leave that. Can you tell me, perhaps, how many things of Erich von Däniken correspond to the correctness and the truth with regard to his representations and assertions? Maybe you can give me a percentage.
Sure, I can do that, because in recent times I have dealt very intensively with these things. His basic statements regarding the intelligences from the depths of universal space and influencing the human beings of Earth are to be confirmed completely. But his statements in reference to many ancient relics of bygone times are in most cases based on very extravagant fantasies. Only less than 4% of his statements correspond to reality, as I could determine through the most exact calculations. The man Erich von Däniken, unfortunately, tends too much to force all ancient findings and everything existing here since time immemorial into the area of extraterrestrial intelligences, because he is too caught up in these things and has long lost the clear overview. If he ever possessed this at all, which is doubtful after everything that I have analyzed.
Well, then you also know what he has written, for example, about the so-called Nazca Plain, which is in Peru, if I am correctly oriented.
I know what he reports about that, sure.
Okay. And what does it really concern with the alleged air landing signs or airfields, etc.?
The productions represent an astrological calendar as well as an astrological garden. At an earlier time, when these grounds were still operating and were used astrologically, the enormous signs were surrounded by gardens, out of which the astrological signs protruded like parkways, etc. They were made by human beings of Earth, and indeed without any influence from extraterrestrial intelligences.
That answer is enough for me, but I have another question. How many other objects move around Sirius?
There are 5 of those.
Thanks. Then still a very unusual question. You once told me in confidence that the so-called criminality could be repaired scientifically and medically, if this would only be striven for. You told me at that time that some toxin develops in excess in the human being for some reason, which makes him or her criminal. What is this toxin called, and what then should be done against it?
The toxin is called phenylethylamine. If this is neutralized in the human body, then through this, that substance is made ineffective, which drives the human being to criminality. I may not explain more about that, however.
Well, I actually also did not want to know more. But now, is it possible that I can bring forward some questions of group members? One would like to know who he was at an earlier time, etc.
We have already often stated that we will answer no more questions that are placed by persons other than yourself. Any attempt would also be futile if you would ask these or even such questions as if they were from you.
Yes, you have said that several times. It was indeed only a vague attempt.
Sure, that is your style, but in the future we will truly answer no more questions if these are not in the direct interest of our mission and the group's existence and its direct interests.
Well, okay, that is clear to me. Then I have here a letter from Elsie for you, Quetzal. To my knowledge, it contains an important question in reference to the continued existence of the center.
So let me see it, thanks. Yes, I understand, but I may not and do not want to give an answer to this question. If I would do that, then I would thereby limit the freedom of those who are addressed in this letter. The inheritance issue is to be regulated in such a way as we have worked it out. Nothing further should be done because we may not make determinations for the future and for human beings who have not yet seen the light of the world and with whom we still could not talk about these issues and could not obtain their consent. We could give the advice of the inheritance transfer, as we have given it in the present case, only because a preview allowed us the possibility of this advice. I will not answer the other questions in Elsie's letter because they are purely personal in nature, and because we, as already explained, will no longer answer such questions. The solution of the center's continued existence would be found, as already stated earlier, in a group acquisition, as you already explained.
I did indeed say that, and I also accept it. But here, I still have some letters for Simya Se, also from children. I do not think that you should give any response to them. Rather, they are simply addressed to you, in order to thank you and to greet you. If you will receive them?
Sure, I am very happy about this. Pay my dear thanks to the people who wrote these.
One letter is from Vreni, another is from Beat, and one is from Christian. There is also something from Caroline, I think.
Are those the children of Beat and Vreni?
Yes.
Pay them my very dear thanks and my joy. But I really cannot reply to the letters.
That surely also is not expected. Certainly they will also be so happy about the fact that it gives you joy.
That is very sweet, and the relations between you all and us seem to me to be almost as they were at an earlier time, before the unfortunate difficulties found their beginning. But it is not yet time again, although I very much hope that everything will be as loving as it used to be.
We also hope that for all of you and ourselves, but the decision is still pending, which should fall within the first 2 weeks of March. You know what demands are placed, and only with their fulfillment can everything be brought back into normality. In particular, Herbert and H play a certain important role in this, which must find its correctness by the beginning of the month of March. You know that we must place the demand on H, that by the beginning of March, he is to be living in the near or immediate vicinity of the center, within a radius of no more than 10 kilometers. The reason for this is so that he finally evolves in certain things, which is not possible for him, however, without the fulfillment of this demand. For Herbert, the demand is for him to adapt himself, at last, into the group and community in full measure, and also to take his duties of meditation seriously. The other still objectionable points with him, as well as with HMAS, will then surrender themselves. If and when that happens, everything can be initiated again in the old ways. On the whole, the other group members have striven so far in the meantime that everything starts off much better. And finally, there is a ray of hope in reference to the continued existence and the progress in the group, as well as in reference to the entire work. The progress of the individual group members is remarkable, but it should not and must not be concluded from this that a decline in the efforts could now be allowed. This is also true for Herbert and H particularly. This also means that if H now apparently fits himself into the order, becoming willing to live in the near vicinity of the center, then he cannot cancel his living there at a later point in time. It was already communicated to you confidentially some time ago that if the interests were not resolved in a significant form, then a special clause would have to be prepared by me, which states that fallible group members, who would have to be excluded during the time of the building up, would have to do without all rights, as they are given in the statutes, and would no longer have access to the center or to any interests of the group under any circumstances in their present lives. We must hold to this, unfortunately, but it should still be explained clearly and plainly that such a special clause may only be created by us alone.
These things are clear to me, and despite my reluctance, I also had to present this to the group recently.
That was surely of necessity. And in my opinion, it probably would have been better if these issues had been brought up in the reports, because very much strain on the nerves would have remained spared to you through this.
Partially, you are surely right, but now I have the matter behind me, yes. Look here. Here you have a copy of Life and Death and of the Law of Love.
Thank you very much.
Concerning the writings, I have to tell you that in the meantime, it has become of necessity that you compose an article that is directed against the use of nuclear power.
That is a concern again, my son. Nevertheless, I am not a nuclear physicist, and I do not exactly understand a lot about these things. On the other hand, I have enough work with the drawing up of the spiritual teaching and with many other tasks.
You know how your time begins to press, and that you, therefore, still have to do some more. I am sorry that I have to tell you this because I know only too well how ill you are in truth. But there is no other option for me.
All right, my son. I myself know how right you are. Then I will just wedge myself behind this area and see to it that I bring something useful to such an article.
Unfortunately, no one can be found on the earth who could relieve you of this work. I have endeavored myself around it, but all my attempts failed.
Do not worry about it. I will take over the work soon. Apparently it is urgent.
That is of correctness, because things have arisen again in recent times, which require a suitable article and which should find a global distribution as soon as possible.
Okay, I am already thinking about how I should write it. But now, I would once again have a somewhat unusual question. Can you tell me how much oxygen a full-grown tree actually supplies, and how many young trees are needed to replace a full-grown tree in its oxygen production?
This question falls into the area of one of my professions, and therefore I can answer it for you. A full-grown coniferous tree of the fir kind produces a quantity of oxygen every 24 hours that is needed for 12 adult human beings to live and breathe. For the second question, If you make a comparison with an oak tree of 100 years of age, then 2,563 young trees of the same kind are needed to produce as much oxygen as the full-grown tree.
Thanks, that's enough for me. Yes, those were in fact the questions that I had in stock for today.
Then we should end our conversation for today.
As you wish. So once again, quite loving and cordial thanks for your visit, and please also greet the others for me and thank them for me. It made me very happy to see you again.
Not so fast, my friend. I first have to do some things with you because you truly look very ill and worn out. Come here, then we can begin.
Brief encounter with Tar Hintish Madruti, the 4th of February, 1979.
It was yesterday, Billy's birthday, the 3rd of February 1979, when I, Calliope Maya, at around 14:38 hours, was coming from the kitchen into our living room because I wanted to get something there.
Opening the door, I took my first step into the room. As I stood there startled, for at the rear living room exit there stood a large male figure, who was dressed in a strange grey suit, a kind of overall which had a large round opening in the neck, which evidently served for a helmet, which the man was not wearing, however. All around the belt, some strange things were attached. Evidently startled himself, the bearded man looked at me for a second, then took a step backwards and grasped with his left hand onto a small device on his belt, upon which he simply dissolved, from one split second to another, into nothing. He just disappeared without a trace, and indeed, without a sound. Still standing there startled, wild thoughts shot through my head before it became clear to me that the man, at whom I had stared for about 15 seconds, could have been no one other than Tar, the extraterrestrial friend of Billy. Billy's description of this man, at any rate, fit very exactly to the figure in the living room. And that it had actually been Tar. He confirmed this to Billy still on the same day, for at Fjorton, 46 hours, so about 15 minutes after the incident, the 119th contact took place, at which, as Billy explained, Tar told him that he had looked for him in the living room and in the bedroom, where Billy was minutes before Tar made his appearance, and where he actually still was. But then he went outside through the bedroom passageway's outside door in order to go to the garage, where he settled something. Then after that the contact took place. Poppy Calliope Zafirio.
Original letter.